Good morning and welcome everyone to today's CFOLC program, Work From Anywhere. My name is Emily Smith and I am the Chicago Marketing Director for the CFO Leadership Council. We also have John Gimpert, Director for the CFOLC, who will be moderating the session. We thank you for your continued membership and partnership within our tight-knit finance executive community. For those of you attending one of our webinars for the first time, welcome. For those of you who regularly take part in our virtual learning events, welcome back. Before we get started, we just wanted to let everyone know that your lines are muted to avoid distractions. However, we certainly encourage your questions and comments throughout today's discussion. So please feel free to type your question in the questions box and we will get your questions answered. If you are a member of the CFOLC, you will receive 1.5 CPEs for today's webcast. Just as you would in the live event, to receive credit, you must be a current member and answer all 5 polling questions asked today. We will interrupt the discussion to bring those to you and give you a chance to answer. In order to answer the polling questions effectively, you must be logged into today's session. If you've dialed in and want to receive CPEs, please hang up and use the direct link provided to you at registration. If you are wondering how to become a member of the CFOLC connect with either myself or John after the webcast and we can help facilitate that. The good news is that if you join today, you will qualify for the CPE for today's session. Going on to our sponsors are content experts and thought leaders. Each of them have been selected to provide leadership and resources within our group. We want to thank each of our sponsors. I also want to welcome our new members. We have a few new members that have joined us. Each member is a building block and increases the value of our tight-knit finance community. If you are not a member, I encourage you to take a look at our premium or virtual membership. Reach out to me at emily@cfolc.com and I can give you more information. And I'm going to turn the slide over to John real quick to have him make some comments on our CFO Masterclass. John, you want to comment about that?
Hey, thank you, Emily, and good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for getting up early and jumping on the webcast. As we kick it off here, I thought I'd just take a few seconds here to talk about our 10th annual conference. It's called CFO Masterclass. It is 3 days of virtual learning and interaction for you. The first day is a Wednesday, which will include a series of solution webcasts. These are opportunities for you to participate in virtual workshops with a thought leader and interact with other CFOs and financial executives around a common business issue. And then the Thursday and Friday is more of a traditional conference setting. We're doing this jointly with MIT, and we have some phenomenal CFOs. For example, the CFO of Robinhood, Peloton, John Rex, former CFO of Microsoft, and several others. So it's going to be just a star set of CFOs that will be sharing their perspectives. So you know, if you're a premium member, this is free. All other members are 50% off. Please sign up now. The various virtual workshops, we're going to be filling up pretty quickly because they'll be limiting some attendance to those workshops. But sign up now. There's a lot going on, and I'd encourage you to take advantage of this. So, Emily, maybe we'll go to the next slide.
Yes, I wanted to go over our October 8th event. CXO Now is a network of highly accomplished women in the C-suite who are forming pragmatic solutions focused mainly on challenges they face in their professional lives. October 8th is a must-attend event for all women members. You should encourage your peers to attend as well, as this event is not limited to members. So we hope that all of you will be able to join this event.
Yeah, you know, Emily, one thing I would like to add for everybody about CXO Now is notice the letters are CXO, they're not CFO. So what that means is this is for women executives who would like to attend and engage with other women executives. So it is not limited to only financial executives. So If you have a peer out there in another area of specialty, and you think they might want to participate in these fireside chats, get them connected. You can go to CFO.com and sign up for this. There's no charge for this. This is just a community of female executives that we're organizing to hear from stellar executives like the CFO of Zoom. Go ahead, Emily.
Great. We also wanted to let you know of our upcoming events. The part 3 and part 4 of our series of realizing success while facing today's uncertainty. We wanted to wait until we wanted to move these 2 programs until after the election. Some things will probably most likely be changing. So we switched these dates to November 18th and December, 16th. So please be on the lookout for promotional material for that, explaining more in detail what those programs will be about.
Okay, very good.
John, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you. So, Emily, you want to advance the slide, please? Great, thank you very much. I'd like to introduce our 3 speakers today. Emily, maybe you can kind of go back. There we go. Thank you again.
Yes.
Go back to the, okay, got it. We have 3 great panelists today. Like we do on most of our panel discussions, we like to bring in executives, thought leaders from other areas other than the finance area to help our CFOs to what I call round out their view, their understanding of a current issue. And as many of you attending know, we are going through a 4 episode, if you will, series about exploring the implications due to all the challenges of COVID. And this series is about working from home. And not only that, but people are now working from anywhere. They've just kind of become very mobile in how they're working, and that certainly does create some challenges for all organizations, whether it's culture, financial implications, legal implications, and even how you source and bring in people to your organization, and eventually going back into the more normal workspace. So today we're going to explore those. And we got a great panel today. Mary Catherine Curry, who's a partner with Polsinelli, and she's a member of their task force around COVID, and she's advising clients on the legal implications of COVID. We have Jim O'Malley, an executive recruiter, and he's going to talk a little bit about the changing dynamics around employee or candidate expectations, changes in how you source and onboard people, and those types of matters. Because hiring is still going on and needs to continue. And then, of course, we have Kathy Osborne, is a Senior Vice President of Human Resources. She's going to bring the perspective of the HR leader who's kind of living and breathing all these challenges and who has worked with her company to go through a real transition to work from anywhere. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Let's first maybe have each of our panelists talk a little bit about their background, share a little bit about who you are. And so why don't we kick it off? And, Mary Catherine, I'll start with you.
Okay, great. Thank you, John, for the introduction. So my name is Mary Catherine Curry, and I am a partner at Polsinelli. And I'm specifically in the labor and employment group, but in particular, I am in a subgroup which deals mostly with advice and counseling. So though I do deal with some employment litigation, my role primarily is counseling clients in trying to avoid litigation and assessing issues before they become problems for our clients. So my background is a bit unique because I spent 10 years clerking in both federal and state courts. So I spent a lot of time in litigation and on the court side, and then came over to private practice. But as I said, my role at the firm really dabbles in several different areas of employment, whether it be pay equity analysis, constant guidance on discrimination claims, dealing with terminations or how to handle terminations. All of those areas would be sort of my wheelhouse.
Sounds like we lost audio.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Mary Catherine, you were a little bit hard to hear. So I'm not, your audio was a little muffly, just so we can kind of try to fix that ongoing. Jim, do you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Jim O'Malley. As John mentioned, I'm an executive recruiter. I co-founded a firm called Comar Partners here in Chicago about 2 years ago. I've got about 25 years of corporate experience prior to getting into executive search 10 years ago. Our firm is a generalist firm. We work across multiple industries. We have 6 offices nationally. I have 16 colleagues total. And I spend most of my days supporting private equity, professional services, and financial services firms. But again, we do work across multiple industries. As John indicated, as executive recruiters, we're seeing certainly the impact of COVID on a number of fronts. It certainly has impacted a lot of the strategic plans of our business partners. But nonetheless, recruiting continues, particularly at an executive level, and particular as it pertains to vacancies. If you're a CFO of a mid-cap organization and you lose a key FP&A executive, you're going to need to replace that person. But perhaps what we're seeing more and more frequently is our clients have adjusted some of their strategic and growth plans. So excited to join you today and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Jim. Kathy?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As John has mentioned, my name is Kathy Osborne. I am the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Accord Financial, and I've actually am occupying this role or moved into this role as the first ever HR strategic or even HR role that Accord Financial has had, which intrigued me because it's a testament to their commitment around future growth and the strategic plan and valuing people and putting people first. So Accord Financial operates both in the US and Canada. We have 4 locations in Montreal, Toronto, and British Columbia. And then we have offices in Chicago, which was formerly known or also known as CapEx Partners, and locations in Greenville, South Carolina. And while I'm new to the financial services world, I just joined this organization. I think my anniversary is tomorrow, October 1st. So I made it 12 months. My background, while it is HR, I've spent a number of years in HR. I am traditionally from a retail organization and more on the retail side and the operation side of retail, and then moved into training and HR. So I've spent a lot of time at some big box retailers running HR, also in the field. And then my most recent was at, again, first, I kind of started to get into these positions because it's what intrigues me, but Leopardo Construction in the Chicagoland area, the first ever HR in that role as well. So I am absolutely looking forward to this conversation. As I always look at our key partners on the HR side are definitely our CFOs. We are on the front lines with all of our partners, so to be attached at the hip. So this is a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Kathy. Hey, Emily, let's go to our first survey question. We're going to quickly set it up here, and then we're going to jump it off. And just real quickly, what has your organization done for its employees during COVID and the transition to the virtual work settings? Select all that apply there. So while people are answering that, let's go to Jim O'Malley. Jim, Talking about surveys, your firm conducted a survey recently about this topic. Can you kick it off and talk a little bit about what you found out? What were some of the key outcomes? And I'll ask both Kathy and Mary Catherine to jump in as they feel fit to kind of add to it. Go ahead, Jim.
So, opportunity to stay relevant with our clients. Obviously, the volume of their recruiting has gone down significantly, but we wanted to see if we could provide ways of adding value. So we commissioned this employee well-being survey. Really something very basic, 10 questions. It took 3 minutes for our participants to complete. And I think overwhelmingly everybody recognized that your employees' state of mind and well-being during COVID is an important factor. And so we asked questions like, what is your organization doing for its employees in terms of staying connected? And we heard everything from virtual happy hours to them sending gifts and baskets, trying to give people access to workout classes, encouraging them to take their PTO, providing them with childcare services. So a wide host of things we saw our clients doing for their people. One of the other questions was, what are they doing differently to make sure that employees can be productive at home in terms of, do they have the proper Wi-Fi access? Do they have the right office equipment? Are they providing financial support to acquire additional home office supplies and things of that nature? We noticed that a lot of our clients were also implementing new technologies. Video is something that's been around, but very few have been utilizing it. So we're seeing and hearing everything from instant messaging platforms like Slack and Google Chat and Microsoft Teams being widely used, in addition to the various types of video call-in meetings such as Zoom and Skype and GoToMeetings. Some of our clients that operate call centers and have large non-exempt workforces were also implementing or looking at implementing monitoring software such as productivity trackers and things of that nature. We're also finding that the notion of security software is becoming more and more important. Some saw that early on and made that a part of the process. Others, unfortunately, had to react to that when they've noticed that they've had some viruses and they've had some penetrations and disruption because of from hackers. So encourage everybody that's listening today to really give thought to security, software security, and the like. But some of the, I think, some of the more interesting responses to the questions are, things like, what are you doing to promote mental health? I think we're hearing a lot about individuals being isolated. There being a lot more calls for one-on-one counseling, and again, things like, how to give, when the work flows into the home, how do you turn it off? I think all of these were very, very important. And then finally, we talked a little bit about when our clients expecting to get back to work and back in the office, since most of them are working remotely now. And we've heard everything from people are already going back into the office to they won't be going back into the office, and kind of everything in between. And so I think the response rate to our survey, typically surveys response rates are anywhere from on the low end 10% to the high end in the high 20s, 30%. We had an over 40% response rate, which was I thought very significant, and suggested that this is something that employers were looking for. And so if you haven't done a wellness survey to your employee base, that would be something we would recommend. And anyone that would care to see our survey, we'd be happy to share it. Just speak with Emily or John, and we'd be happy to share it. We actually modified the survey and tailored it to specific industries that we work with versus kind of generally broadly sent out to all of our client base. And so we customize the survey depending if it was a professional services firm or a financial services firm, portfolio company for a private equity concern, consumer products, et cetera. So I think the good news is the survey can be used across multiple industries, and with some slight modifications, it can be very useful depending on what industry segment you represent.
Well, that's great, Jim. Thanks for the offering to provide that to the attendees. And so we'll take you up on that and we'll push that out to everybody who attended. And I think if we quickly look at our own responses, Jim, just building off what you just shared, you can see the results there that virtual social events is top of the list there, which is all about, keeping engagement. And then the second highest is personal time and days off, 35%. And maybe that's a topic that, Kathy can add to is, gee, how do you manage something like that when tracking, personal extra time off when everybody's working remotely? And so we can get to that at some point. If you want to add a comment now, Kathy, that'd be great. I don't know what your practice is at your company.
It is interesting because we're noticing in our company, and I think many companies are doing this, whereby we would hope that they would take their time off, right, to just regenerate. They've got the time there, but many have said, well, I had to cancel my spring break or I had to cancel my trip, therefore I'm not taking vacation. So we haven't given or provided extra time off. We're seeing an excess of PTO time that has accumulated, right, and encouraging people that during the COVID time, or while we were trying to figure things out, or before we think that things are going to get really busy next year, trying to encourage our employees to take the time. So we're seeing it, right? And I think many companies are seeing sometimes the opposite. I think we're going to get into, maybe this is something that Mary Catherine's going to see, is with exempt and non-exempt employees and people carrying time over and the amount of hours they work and how people want to count that, is we're going to start to see a surge of issues potentially, or topics brought up about how much time they can carry over into the next year, because there was so much time on the table this year where, Canada's not like the US. I can't say use it or lose it. In Canada, it's different. In the US, for exempt, I can tell them to use it or lose it, right, based on our policy. So I think those are going to become issues for us, in my opinion.
Yeah, so Mary Catherine, I don't know if you have any comments, you want to add anything at this time to either what Kathy or Jim said. I'll toss it to you just quickly.
I think that we're on the legal side, of course, we tend to get more, specific questions about, what can I do? Because I want to do X and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble if I do it, right? But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of overlap. Certainly what Kathy said with respect to FLSA issues, that's a big sort of open issue right now with people when you're talking about the non-exempt workforce. Are companies properly tracking when people are working? Are they being paid rather for all the time they are working, because everyone's now working all the time? And I think that's crossing over from, it used to be just our exempt population. Now it's both, oftentimes. And we need to counsel our employers that they need to really be paying attention to, first of all, are they tracking that? Are they paying attention to when their employees are working, when they want them to be working, and when they don't want them to be working? And are they communicating that? And I think that goes back to Jim's point, which is really just this idea that remote work for so many of our clients has really put communication with the workforce, at the top of the list. And performance management is really what we're seeing as sort of the biggest concern from our employers, because identifying and measuring what really matters and what people are accountable for is key, but no one's really relying on FaceTime anymore. So it's getting more focused on these metrics, which is what Jim kind of alluded to with technology. And you can use technology to track that. But we're at the same time counseling our clients that can lead people in the wrong direction too, if you're not accurate or that doesn't really match up with what matters to the organization. And a good example that we always throw out there for our clients is what law firms do wrong, right? Law firms sort of obsess about the short-term, month-to-month billable hour and rates with clients. But sometimes what happens then is that turns off good service, and it doesn't allow for building those long-term relationships. So I just mention that because even though part of it is a legal concern, part of it is just what Kathy's talking about too. It's just making sure you're engaged with your workforce, because that's how you avoid legal problems ultimately down the line.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Emily, let's go to the second survey question real quickly. Throw it up, toss it up for everybody to respond to. But we'll keep the conversation going here in the meantime. And Mary Catherine, I want to just continue to build off of you. You've raised some good comments there. You're on your firm's, I'll call it task force to helping clients understand the implications of COVID. We're all in these uncharted territories. Maybe what I'll ask is, it seems like there could be some new or understood legal implications. And so how are you helping and working with clients to understand, I'll call it the legal risks or the issues that they should be alert to as they walk into these new arrangements with employees, or even start thinking about bringing employees back? Can you comment on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the one of the big questions we're getting a lot is you have everyone remote, and then you want to start forcing people back or bringing people back, but not everybody wants to come back. Can you force them back? And talking about the different scenarios that employers are facing with sort of that fact pattern. And the short answer is you can bring people back if that's their job and it's time to come back, but you just have to be thinking of, in COVID times, some specific concerns now, because we do have OSHA concerns, and OSHA is in charge of the health and safety of our workforce. And so you want to make sure, do you have everything in place that makes it a safe environment for everyone to come back to? Because OSHA has, as you would assume, seen a huge uptick in claims. And, that is where we're going to see a lot of litigation. I think OSHA has also been more funded than most of the other agencies recently. So they have the resources to go after employers and to actually look into these claims. So just, when we're advising on coming back into the physical environment, we're doing a lot of policies and procedures that we're setting up for employers so that they know that they're doing the safety check. They're actually, they have some preparedness plan. A lot of times these are state laws that are in place. In Illinois, certainly you're required to do so. So you have to check temperatures. You have to make sure that the employees that are coming in don't show any signs of COVID, those kinds of things. So a lot of policies that are in place just for safety measures. I think the other issue that comes up is sometimes the accommodation issue under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA concerns, because you may assume that you can just force everybody back, but there may be some of your workforce that you need to go through the interactive process with under the ADA to see if maybe they should be accommodated and work remotely. And we see that a lot. So just because we have this mass, influx of people working remotely and we want to, slowly bring them all back, doesn't get rid of our standard process of reviewing each case individually. Certainly if there's an accommodation need, we have to take that seriously. So those are a couple points that I would mention.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's the results of the survey real quick. It looks like 86% of our attendees are providing home equipment, home office equipment for their employees. It's interesting because there was certainly an uptick that's been published about many of the hardware suppliers, PC suppliers, others, reporting really brisk demand and trying to fulfill that given the challenges of COVID. And then also I was talking to, our sponsor Arminio, and they made mention of an increase in security assessments, increased hacking occurrences that are happening because now, networks are extended because people are working at home and don't have the same rigorous, formal, robust kind of security measures. So that's something certainly CFOs should be thinking about. Maybe I'll, Kathy, I'll kind of toss it over to you after listening to, Mary Catherine and the guidance that she provided to us. Maybe for you, I would ask, in working with a CFO and thinking about all the issues that Mary Catherine talked about, how would you work with, coach, interact with, your co-CEO at your company to say, how do we get our head around and understand these issues? How do you kind of, apply it in the work setting, given everything that Mary Catherine talked about?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, Mary Catherine brought up, as I think about it, is she's looking at it from a legal point of view, and then you look at it from an HR point of view and a people point of view. I have this motto of productive discomfort. And so for us to be productive in a matter of time, there has to be some discomfort in there. And we've had to operate in that environment, especially the past 6-7 months. We had to adjust very quickly, like everybody did, to work from home. And we were not set up to work from home. Our organization had desktops, in some cases, old desktops, right? While we may have been we're a fully exempt or salaried organization, we are not set up to work in a remote environment. And so having to figure that out within a weekend's time, right before the country was shut down, was significant. And so we have business unit leaders or presidents within each of our business units that, are challenging. Do we want them to work from home, or we have to have them work from home? How do we get them set up, right? And the equipment, getting equipment, we had people that we were on months and months of back order in getting them the technology or the PCs, right, the laptops to their houses. IT was a significant issue, right? As I talk with my IT leader daily, we have a minimum of 1,800 attacks on our domain on a daily basis. So now you're managing IP addresses from all of these houses and local environments where before it was more, contained within that organization. So getting our employees calm enough to understand that we're going to help them, we're going to walk through it. We had, I hate to say this, but there were times that there was, spit and towels kind of trying to keep things together for a period of time just so that they had access to what they needed. But what this did do for us is really bring the team together, and it increased levels of communication that never existed before. It forced the organization to have to communicate in a different way, and to accommodate our employees in a very different way, right? Many had childcare issues. So we said, you deal with your children first and we'll get to work next. So the environment I found myself more engaged on a daily basis with each business unit leader and CEO to talk through, how do we do this? What do we do next? Them looking for guidance. And at times it was just the communication and keeping them calm, at least for the first couple of months of trying to figure this out, right? So it was uncharted waters for everybody. And this has forced us to learn how we operate a business in a completely different environment and ensure that, yes, many of us have strategic plans and we have to pivot from those strategic plans. But now it's, if we have another event like this, or we have a financial crash, or some other catastrophic event happens, do we have the right scenarios in place as an executive team to manage in an environment? That's what I'm forcing my team to think about. Yes, we'll look at the strategic plan, but more about now, what are the scenarios that could happen? and how do we ensure that we have the sustainability to operate going forward, right? That's the hardest part now, I think, as we think about the interaction and the partnership with the CEOs.
So let me dig into that last part because I think that's very insightful what you shared, Kathy, about we experienced some challenging times, and what we learned from that is this whole idea, this concept of scenario planning going forward. Do you have some plans to kind of build off this experience you've had and kind of formalize that in the organization anyway? What are you planning to do with that at this point?
So I did a little bit of this at my last company where we worked with this one author. He's a facilitator, Rod Collins, but we really worked a lot through collective intelligence, right? And really looking at the engagement of all of the employees together at the lowest level all the way up to the highest level and thinking outside the box. We're starting that process now while business is coming back, right? We're a lender, right? We lend to companies that can't go to banks at a higher interest rate. And a lot of our clients are retail clients, especially up in Canada. We know where that's going, our manufacturing. So we're starting the process slowly, but starting with our 2021 planning to really look at what are the bold moves? What are we going to do? There are no barriers in place, right? So starting in the next couple weeks, today is actually a big one that I'm facilitating a session, but we'll start to facilitate sessions around bold moves, scenario-based. How do we stay in business, right? We don't want to become, how do we prevent ourselves from becoming the Kodaks of the world or the Blockbusters of the world, right? Or the Red Boxes of the world. Rather, we want to become the Amazons, right? Or the Googles and staying on top of that. So it's a shift in mindset for our executives, right? And especially, I hate to say this, but this audience is CFOs. CFOs' mindset, many of them are very structured, very linear, and to try to then think and take the risks, because that's significant, is how to then take the risks to really think outside the box to ensure that we still become relevant in the world in which is going to change from here on out.
Okay, thanks. Mary Catherine, I'm going to kind of come back to you because Kathy talked about, and I'm going to put this in a couple of words, change, new policy, the need for communication. As an attorney advising, executives, how would you coach executives to begin to think about and formalize as a process the key, how do I, communicate change in policy so I'm consistent across the organization, especially from a legal implication standpoint? What have you seen? How have you helped clients in that way?
Well, I think the policies, that's a lot of what we spend our time on right now is updating policies, because what we're seeing is with the changes that COVID has brought, you do need to update and change your policies. Things have changed. And to Kathy's point, their whole model has shifted, right? And so if a business doesn't look at, are we communicating now what our expectations are and how those have changed, and how we're going to review our employee population based on these new metrics and these changes, you have a real gap there and a legal risk ultimately if you don't really set that out and outline it. So we talk a lot about, remote work policies and putting all of these different issues into your policy so that employees have a place to go to determine what is the employer's, what is the company's stance on working remotely and work hours and the remote office, even things as simple as just the equipment they're using. I know Jim mentioned the security issues. We draft, data security policies, because even though you can use, again, technology to help with all of those issues, humans are usually your biggest risk, always. So training, not only drafting all of these policies and really outlining, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What do we need to be protecting? But then, reaching out to your workforce and saying, we want to make sure you understand all of this. And you can do that. I think, some of the more traditional setups, corporate setups have been reluctant or concerned about how do we, we're used to getting everybody in a room to talk to them in person about all these issues. But it's amazing how easily we have shifted to Zoom and these, web platforms when we're forced to, and how it actually does work quite well. You can see your workforce on the screen, and you can have conversations that way. And we used to think that wasn't going to be good enough, but now we're finding, actually it may be just fine. And connecting with our workforce in that way for all of these reasons does work. And so one of the things that I feel like I end up repeating to some of our bigger clients is that, look at some of these higher performing smaller companies. They've been doing this for a long time, and look at how they do it. And let's, we can use some of their guidance to, we can use their experience rather to then implement that with what transitions you're going through, and put those new policies, those new procedures in place. So, I hope that answers the question, John, but let me know if you were thinking of something different than what I've mentioned.
No, that was actually great. It was very comprehensive. Thanks.
John, can I add on to that? I think this is important because I think Mary Catherine brought this up a couple times, which I'm not sure that everybody keeps it top of mind, but when we talk about metrics and we talk about performance management, and we've got folks that are remote, I can speak for my organization, a formalized performance management process had never been put in place, right? So that is something that I'm introducing along with competencies that never were introduced, and goals, and how do we rate people. And so I'm finding in some of my locations, right, especially as business is down and we are staffed to operate at a certain revenue level and we're not there, and people will say, I need to let people go. I need to cut people. This one's performance isn't that great. And I'm like, time out. We're not talking performance. We don't have a documented performance improvement plan. I don't have a documented review. I don't have a coaching or a discipline. So if you want to do it based on performance, we're going to prepare a short one-pager performance that is important, that is consistent, and provide it to everyone in the organization and do it off reviews. Or it might be job elimination because the position went away. They're like, but I want to fill it. I'm like, that's not what you can do. So if you eliminate a position, so it's reminding people of the process. If they think, well, I just want to let this one go because I don't think their performance was good. That doesn't work because we don't have metrics and we don't have performance management in place. So I think that is key because that's the quick move that people want to make and will take the risk. I think the second thing, and Mary Catherine brought this up, is that people are used to getting everybody in a room. Many companies, especially that have an older school culture, are very used to hand-holding their employees. Well, I can't put out new benefits unless I get everybody in a room and I put up a slideshow and I share every benefit and I bring all my reps in. I can't do that. I overhauled our entire payroll system in the US and Canada and put everybody on a brand new payroll system remotely. Never saw anybody. Overhauled all of the benefits in the US with our partner Gallagher and introduced all new medical, dental, vision, voluntary and involuntary plans, even on what the company is going to cover versus what the employee is going to cover. We did it all remote. And it was almost better to do it that way because it put accountability back in the employee or the associate's hands and not me or an executive hand-holding that person through the process, right? Because I own it as an employee, not my manager or someone else. So technology does work. The increased communication and clear and concise communication with the appropriate planning does work as long as people are connected. And we've been able to see that, right? Because the world can't stop around us. I had to do this to find more efficient ways to cut overhead. I had to look at ways in which, how am I going to save money, but still keep our employees engaged and provide the right level of benefits or service to them. But we can get through that regardless of where people fall in the age spectrum of whether they're baby boomers or Gen Zers, right, or millennials. It can work.
That's great. One thing I was going to ask you real quickly, Kathy, and then Jim, I'm going to go over to you. You're working across different countries. And the COVID has really hit countries differently. Canada has got a different profile than the United States, seems to be adapting to some of the suggested social distancing and other disciplines, suggested. What are you seeing and working across, different, I'll call it countries and cultures, and how are you kind of working through that in this time of challenge? How are you adapting things?
So I will tell you that not only are we dealing with COVID, we're dealing with protests and we're dealing with unrest, right? So here in Chicago, where our office is in the heart of the city, we were dealing with COVID and how the mayor was shutting everything down, but then we were dealing with significant riots and protests, right? So I'm communicating and handling that office much differently than my Greenville, South Carolina. So in Chicago, I'm in a high rise, right? So we're managing that differently, and the protection of our employees versus Greenville, South Carolina, where I'm maybe more in an industrial park and in a self-contained building. But when I go to Canada, as many of you know, Montreal is a country on its own when we get into Quebec, right? And the Quebec rules are different than the Toronto rules that are different than the British Columbia. So it really does become customized. And I invest a lot of time in one-on-one conversations with the business unit leaders in those locations. And my process and how we interact with our employees and what we might put in place on return to work looks different in every location based on what that province, let's say in Canada, is requiring, or the city or the state is requiring, as well as what kind of building are they in? Are they in a self-contained building, right? In Montreal, they're in a high rise, but they share a floor with a medical office. Well, then they don't want to share the bathrooms, right? So all of these different scenarios come into place when you think about protection of our employees. And like Chicago, Toronto, and Quebec, we all take public transportation to go into work. No one's taking public transportation and taking that risk. So are you letting people drive to work and we're paying for all their parking, or we're modifying how they're working from home? But everybody is on a rotation or on a reduced work schedule, and only certain people can come into the office on certain days because we still are an essential business and trying to get work done. So it's a long answer to your question, but it really does become customized, and having to really listen to what that local business unit leader is telling us. And I don't have a policy on a one size fits all. My direction and my guidance becomes very individualized by location.
Well, you kind of went where I was expecting you to, which is one size doesn't fit, everybody. Take the time to understand and work with the local people. It's, even though you got to work fast, you're going to have to kind of understand what's going to work in that country. Jim, I promised to go back to you real quick. I don't know if you have any comments to add to, what we just heard from Kathy or Mary Catherine. Any thoughts, reactions?
Yeah, I think Kathy talked about this discomfort, and I think disruption obviously creates discomfort, but that's not going to go away. I think we have to learn how to live in disruption, because I think the future of our business is going to be disruption is going to be prevalent in it. But again, to Kathy's comments, that how companies respond to disruption is going to determine their ultimate fate. Are they going to go the path of becoming extinct because they don't adapt and change? Or what happens to a lot of organizations is disruption creates innovation. And we're seeing all sorts of innovative things now. Here's an acronym, if you haven't heard. It's going to be one you're going to hear a lot of, and it's RPA, robotic process automation. The concept of artificial intelligence kind of helping machine learning capabilities to handle high volume repeatable tasks. That's been around for some time. I think we've all seen, or maybe even utilize chatbots on our websites that can help clients help us respond to clients' queries. HR, not always known for its innovation, has been implementing RPA for some time, just on how applicants apply, and there's an automatic response to a resume. But you have things like nobots that kind of help search the internet and store specific information, knowledge. And then you've got probots where you can actually automate repeatable rules to help process data. And so CFOs are starting to look at this and say, well, how can I take some of these repeatable tasks and make them more efficient, drive down costs? So I think RPA is going to be a game changer in the future. Organizations now are taking the opportunity to look at this during this disruption. Will it eliminate jobs? Perhaps it will, but it's not going to be the jobs, I think, long term that we want to build our economy on anyway. You know, these clerical positions, repeatable work, which creates all sorts of issues. You know, Mary Catherine talked about OSHA and safety issues. You know, a lot of those issues are because people don't have proper workstations. They don't have 10 keypads at home. They're using their keyboard to type in numbers repeatedly. Well, I look at my keyboard, all the numbers kind of go across a horizontal line. That's not an efficient way to be typing in numbers. So the other things we're seeing is just changes. You know, some of the more popular positions right now is CISOs, again, another acronym, which means Chief Information Security Officer. Organizations that may have never contemplated having a Chief Information Security Officer, may have lumped that in with their Director of IT, are now recognizing how critical this is. Because we're all doing business on the open internet, data security is of utmost concern for all organizations. And I think CFOs in particular have to pay attention to this. I think the biggest takeaway from everything we've heard so far from Mary Catherine and Kathy is that you can't ignore this. You can't say, well, that doesn't apply to my business. Or you can't apply the old thinking, you know, how you view this. Like, I heard the term old school. Old school is not a term that you should be proud of. It's a antiquated term. It means you're not embracing this disruption. And so I think the other job that we're seeing a lot of is diversity, equality, and inclusion. And don't just assume that that's in response to social unrest. I think the best organizations view diversity with inclusion and equality first, as well as diversity. It's not just about advancing people of color. Absolutely, that's important. That's critical. But what about inclusion? How do we get people involved that are underrepresented? How do we view and maximize our workforce? How do we get their opinions to weigh in on everything? I mean, the best way to solve a crisis is to get everybody kind of together and tackle this. And I think that's where a good diversity, equality, and inclusion professional, they're not going to view their job simply as kind of advancing diversity in the workforce or affirmative action. They're going to view their job in a very broad context, and I think executives are going to rely on those individuals that way.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jim. You know, I just want to kind of, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathy. I think you were
going to say, he brings up a really good point that can't be overlooked on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because even in my organization, they're like, well, we need, you know, diversity, and we need to add more senior leaders to the executive team. And I said, don't let me be your token hire or my SVP of capital markets to be your token hire. I don't need to be that for anybody. I'm here not for the diversity of race and ethnicity or whatever you think you might, or gender. I'm here for diversity of thought, right? Diversity of experiences. And it's getting that mindset to change as well. But somebody said this in a meeting yesterday, or a web meeting yesterday, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And diversity is essentially inviting somebody to the party, right? Equity is inviting them to dance, and inclusion is if they're dancing like nobody's watching, right? So if you think about how that process works and the mindset of how people have to shift, and especially in the type of candidate that you want to be part of your team, that's going to elevate you to be a better organization. But there's too many executives and too many leaders and managers out there that are still looking at diversity in, again, going back to the comment of old school way, of very archaic, and not understanding the whole concept of what diversity, equity, and inclusion really is about in today's environment. Sorry, I had to get that in there.
That's great. We're going to do a survey question very quickly here, and I'm going to come back and kind of continue to talk about this diversity inclusion discussion we really got into that I think is very interesting and important for our CFOs to really think about and kind of move forward in their organization. So here's our question: has your firm implemented any new technology that were not used prior to COVID? This is kind of building once again off some of the things that Jim earlier said. Kathy talked about this as well, as how do you keep engagement up? And so quickly answer this, and then we'll go to the go back to the results here. And just as a reminder, CXO is going to have the CFO of Zoom on, which is going to be a very, very cool call. I would just encourage you to invite your female peer executives to attend that. It's open to anybody who's at some level of a senior individual in an organization. So let's, Jim, I want to go back to you real quick. And Emily, if you could take the survey down, that'd be great. Jim, this is really building off Mary Catherine's comments. It's building off what Kathy has talked about. We're living in a new world. We're going through a lot of change and because of COVID, but also these other dynamics around diversity, inclusion. What are you seeing? You're out there meeting with executives, you're talking to candidates every day. What's the kind of intangible profile change that you see in candidates? What are executives looking for other than the core functional skills, given today's world and how people need to operate going forward?
Well, I think we're seeing a little shift, not as much as we'd like to, on hiring based on core competencies versus specific experiences and years of experience, et cetera. I think particularly when you're looking at being more inclusive and being more aggressive in terms of raising the ranks of the diverse workforce, you've got to understand that in many cases they haven't had the opportunity or they don't have the years of experience. The notion of hiring for potential is what we've advised our clients to do, and it's not without precedence. I mean, campus recruiting is nothing but hiring for potential. Here you are, you're hiring young people that have received an education, they have absolutely no work experience, and so if you look at the types of questions that are asked a campus recruit versus how we interview experienced candidates, it's night and day. I would tell you that the interview methodology and approach for university recruitment is far more productive, is going to get to the core on whether or not the individual has the competencies to do the job versus what experiences do they have. We get so caught up on the halo effect when we interview experienced candidates. We look for something like that we have in common, and then we focus on that because we want to like candidates. And the best way to like candidates is to find something in common with them. So a good interviewer is going to figure that out and focus on that and disrupt and take over the interview, quite frankly, which is why I think diverse candidates, people of color, female candidates more often than not they get the raw end of the deal because, a female is not going to have the same experiences as a male. A diverse candidate is not going to have the same experiences as many of the individuals in the workforce. And so I think listen, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different results. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what's happening now with diversity and inclusion. It's got everybody's attention. The chief diversity and inclusion officer is a role that's existed for some time. But if you look at that track record of success of those roles, it's not been very good. And if you talk to the individuals that were in those roles, that were mavericks and trailblazers in the last 10 years, they will tell you that they experienced a great deal of dissatisfaction in the job because it was really just a figurehead. So I think now organizations have an opportunity to really make that an impactful role. And I think part of that is the type of person that they select into that role. And again, broadly speaking, how do we apply the principles of talent selection in a very different way? And I think a game changer is going to be organizations that focus on potential will win the battle, because there'll be no excuse. You can't say, well, there's not enough people in my space that have the experience. Well, I'm not really to focus on experience. I'm focused on competencies and traits. Competencies, and everybody has traits. And so I think when we counsel and coach our clients about, okay, Jim, we want you to do a diversity hire for us, I really challenge them. And I say, well, what does that mean? And again, how are you going to interview that person? Are you going to interview them the same way you've been interviewing candidates in the past? And of course, I ask them, have you tried to do this before? And so again, if they're not willing to make the changes, if they're not willing to invest in a different approach, if they're not willing to accept that some of the candidates that we're going to present to them aren't going to have the years of experience, or may not have been in that particular industry, or won't tick off all the boxes, but they will have the traits, they will have the behaviors, they will have the competencies important for the job. If they're not willing to consider that, then I don't know that I can help them. And so we have to be courageous too, because it's our reputation in the marketplace. We don't want to take work on that we're not going to be successful in executing. It's not about filling a job. I think a true executive recruiter understands that what they're doing it has much more impact than filling a job. It's going to change not only the life of the person that's going into that role, but it's going to change the lives of everybody that person works with. And so we think it's important to get it right.
Mary Catherine and Kathy, both of you were nodding your heads up and down quite a bit there with Jim's comments. So Mary Catherine, let me go to you first. Anything you want to add to Jim's comments?
Well, I'm very pleased that this conversation moved to diversity and inclusion, because it is such a big issue, and we are expecting to see a lot more conversation with our clients on these issues. Of course, there are some relationships with COVID and the overall remote work issues, but I think it more has to do with where we are in our country right now, and this issue just coming to the forefront and how important it is, and the fact that it does matter. So I'm just glad that both of you are commenting on it and putting an emphasis on it as much as you are, because from a legal perspective, I participate and help our clients through pay equity audits, for example, or diversity audits. And these are, I feel like now is the time for everyone, regardless of whether you've been audited or you wind up on, a list to be audited, you should be addressing this. Now is the time to look at it, because I don't even want to say usually, all the time, every time we do this with clients, every time we say we're going to go through this process with you, and of course the benefit of doing it with your legal counsel is everything's privileged. So you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I don't want to do this because what if it comes out that we have a lot of problems and then everyone finds out? Well, we manage that, right? The benefits are so much greater than just determining that you have inequities, right? Determining that, wow, we didn't realize how many, of our women employees were being paid far less than our male employees. We didn't realize that we had such a diversity gap until we looked at the data, until we, laid it all out. And more importantly, what we end up finding is that there are other issues, right? Maybe you don't have your process set up appropriately. Maybe, and we've had this happen with clients where doing these kinds of assessments internally, they realize, wow, we have a real big recruiting problem. that's what's driving all of this, because over here in this office, so-and-so is just recruiting all of their cousins or family members or people they know, and they all look the same. And that's really how this has driven our inequities. And so you can get to a lot of issues that will make your business so much healthier by looking deep into your organization for these kinds of issues. And I guess I would just put a plug in for considering doing these analyses when you don't have to, before you get sued. Do them now, because then you are just in such a better place as a company, and you're also set up to deal with, should you get any litigation down the road, you're already set up. You already know what you need to do and what your data shows. Every company should know what their data shows. So I think it's great you're bringing that up.
That's great. That's a great action item for all of our attendees. And Kathy, let me go to you. You, like I said, your head was going up and down quite a bit as Jim talked. What do you want to add? What can you add?
I think he was spot on, right? When you look at talent, and this is especially it's in any company that I've been in an HR role, when you're acquiring talent and looking at talent, it is about potential. It isn't all about, I need them to come to the table with X amount of experience, especially in an entry-level role and looking at candidates coming out of school. There is no experience for them. And especially in today's world, whereby some of the positions that we have to question and challenge ourselves from a productivity is that, do we need them in place, such as data entry, a client service rep, right, of some sort. Some of these candidates can come in and have the most up-to-date training, technology. They've got from an assessment standpoint, they have the potential that they know we're going to be successful. So it's really focusing on that. And I think the other thing, he hit the nail on the head, is, the diversity officers have been in place for decades, right? And for some of them, they are trailblazers, and that's the problem. Some of us that are first enroll and are trailblazers at times may not succeed because the company isn't ready, and it's the next roles that come in. Sorry about that. The beauties of working from home when you can't control the dog in the background. But it is focusing on what is that talent and what is the potential. So everything that Jim said from a talent acquisition, as an HR partner, that's the same thing we talk about to our peers and our CFOs or our executives to really look at and to trust that instinct.
Great, thank you. Emily, let's toss up one more of our Con Ed survey questions quickly here so we can get through it. When does your organization plan to bring employees back into the office? Let's get kind of a temperature read on this one. I just noticed that JP Morgan extended their date for when they're having their employees come back. And another interesting thing I saw just this morning was several employers are making the week of Thanksgiving completely off. They're saying, you're working from home anywhere, we're just going to shut down that week. Enjoy the week off. And I think it's the objective, obviously, is to hit on some of the things that Jim and Kathy talked about in terms of providing time off, getting people to take that time off because they don't seem to be taking it. So let's kind of take these questions real quickly here. It's kind of looking like 33% are looking at the first quarter 21 and 33% when there's an approved COVID vaccine. So pretty interesting. And, Jim, how does this compare to what you saw in the broader population that took your survey? You had a similar question.
Yeah, I think rather than answer this specific question, I think it might be important to note that Harvard Business Review did a polling just in general workforce matters and just said, okay, what do you as an individual employee, what do you want to do? A third of individual employees want to go back to the office, I being one of them. I can't wait to get out of my basement and back into the office. I'm accustomed to riding the train downtown. I'm accustomed to being in the loop. I'm accustomed to meeting clients for coffee. Of course, they're not there right now, so there's no point in me going downtown. So I'm here in my basement. So, but a third of people in the workplace are like me. There's a third that never want to go back to work. And I think that's one of the legal ramifications that Mary Catherine alluded to, that employers are going to need to start to think about that and get in front of that. Because it's going to be very, very hard for an employer to say, well, you can't do your job from home. Well, what do you mean? I've been doing it from home for the last 9 months. And that applies to non-exempt and exempt employees. So that will be an interesting work rules, workplace phenomenon, is the notion of why can't I work wherever I want to work? And we've heard things about working from home versus working from anywhere. I mean, we're seeing clients telling us that some of their people have decided they're going to move to Florida, or they're taking this opportunity to take trips around the world, and they're still working, but it's from Bali, or it's from Paris, or what have you. And then the final third of the workforce wants some kind of combination of being able to go into the office, but also having the flexibility of working from home. Think about those individuals in the Chicagoland area that have the summer cottages up in Wisconsin and Michigan, that they've spent a great deal of COVID at their places. Going forward, they'd love the flexibility of leaving for their cottage on a Thursday night and not having to beat traffic and coming home Sunday, but come home Monday, and then plan on being in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So if you look at the greater workforce in this country, I think it's shaping out to a third want to go back into the office, a third never want to go back, and then a third wants some kind of combination of this. And so I think what we're seeing certainly is employers have had to accommodate this. And let's face it, one of the most fundamental personal elements of the need for face-to-face historically has been hiring, right? Well, I can't possibly hire somebody unless I meet them. Well, guess what? We're doing it. Every client that I'm working with now has had that experience, has gone through the experience of recruiting, hiring, and onboarding an employee without actually ever meeting them face-to-face. And so the world has changed. And some might argue it has changed for the better. And so I think the reality of it is, again, back to that disruption, we have to be comfortable that disruption is going to be part of our day-to-day. I don't think a disaster recovery plan is something that goes in a manual on your shelf. I think it's something that's on your workstation every day, because I can't see this environment not subject to constant change over the next foreseeable future.
Thanks, Jim. Mary Catherine, any comments on legal considerations as it relates to bringing people back after they've been working remotely? What would you share?
I think, we touched on them a little bit already, which is, if you're going to bring people back, that you have to have the safety procedures in place so that they feel like they're safe coming back, and you actually are taking those measures. Now, there are definitely states that have, passed legislation indicating that, employers can't be sued if, something goes wrong and somebody gets COVID while at work. But regardless, you don't want to be in that position where, there's a claim. So, and it depends on where you're located as to, what your liability might be. So safety concerns is number one. And also just, what we're trying to advise clients is less of a legal response really, and just, try to be flexible, right? Because it's to Jim's point that, now your employee population has realized they can get a lot done and be very productive working remotely. And so for you to just say, okay, everybody come back in, we're not going to even consider other options, you're just sort of setting yourself up for problems where you maybe don't need to. So yes, you can do that. I mean, businesses certainly have reasons to say that they need their employee population in, on site for various reasons. But what COVID has done for us is really challenged that question. And we've found that it's not necessarily true in many of the situations. So, I just recommend you call your legal counsel if you have an employee who is pushing back and you have a concern, because again, you want to be careful. You want to take each scenario on a case-by-case basis for all the reasons that we've discussed, but certainly maybe that person needs an accommodation. Maybe they need to work remotely for a certain period of time. We need to assess that so that legally you don't walk yourself into a problem just because you're having a staunch position on returning to work for your entire employee population. So those would be my initial thoughts.
Those are great, thanks. Let's do our last survey question, Emily. Toss it up real quick, and then I'm going to go back to the panel to do what we always call our lightning rod session, which is for each one of them to share, 3 or 4 actionable items that they would coach or advise our attendees to take back to work. And since you're not going back to work, go back to your home office and to kind of think about putting in place or considering for your particular organizations. And so our question is, what can your employees expect when your organization decides to go back? And this is, really more about, they're going to, what's the arrangement going to be? And I think it's looking like about 67% are going to be able to work from home on a part-time basis. So I think one of the things that we've been hearing is that the new reality is going to be permanent. Looks like that's kind of shaping up all over. So with that, maybe Jim, I'm going to go to you first. Lightning rod, what would be the key 3, 4 things you would coach the attendees on, think about, put in place, challenge, their other executives to be discussing in their organization?
Well, one thing we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about is actually recruiting during COVID and the impact that whatever recruiting is occurring today and how will it impact the future of recruiting. I think sourcing never stops. Building a candidate base to have at the ready when you're in a position to hire should never stop. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations have kind of suspended that. You can see that occurring a lot in HR departments where they've laid off their talent acquisition staff and are now relying on their HR business partners to take up recruiting. Well, that's a response or a reaction to an organization that's saying, hey, recruiting isn't important because we're not hiring right now. When the reality of it is recruiting is always important. And the exercise of sourcing, which is identifying talent before you need to hire them, should never stop. And so I would encourage every CFO on listening mode right now to re-examine that when their HR director or head of HR is challenging them about making layoffs, push the HR leader to justify why they need to keep that talent. And if they're not talking about utilizing that talent in a different way, particularly as it relates to kind of building up a sourcing strategy, then they don't deserve to have the talent. So that would be number one. Number two, recruiting and onboarding has changed significantly, and I think it's forever changed. The use of video has actually made the process more efficient and more timely. If you think about the length of a typical recruiting process due to trying to get people scheduled in and out of the office, trying to get candidates that have a full-time job to take time off of work to come in. We've seen also just the process itself where employers have had 7, 8, 9 people interview candidates. Well, when you're interviewing candidates on video, you start to realize, the insanity of that, if you will. And so I think the pace of things have kind of created an opportunity for us to look at our processes. As an executive recruiter, I can't tell you how many times I've flown to New York or flown to Los Angeles for a single interview. again, part of what we do, the importance of what we do for our clients is actually get spend that personal time with the candidate. And you can't just do that on the phone. You've got to meet them. Well, we've learned how to do that with video, and so I don't know that I'll ever get on a plane to fly to New York ever again for a single interview, when I can conduct 4 or 5 of them from my home office. So I think COVID has actually the impact that COVID has had has certainly created this disruption, but in many cases, there's a lot of positives that can come from the disruption. And so I think those would be, and those are the things that I think are important that we haven't covered. To reemphasize some of the things that we have covered that I think are also very important is, safety and security. Safety and security typically only apply to, warehouse and production environments and big banks. Well, guess what? Safety and security applies to every organization today. And I think this is particularly important for the CFO. The health and well-being of their employees is tantamount to the safety of the workforce. And certainly security. The security of the workplace is tantamount to the business. And so these are some of the things that kind of resonate with me, and I think important to kind of strike home to the listening audience.
Thanks, Jim. Kathy, quickly, I'll go to you.
Yeah, so when you asked this question, I thought a lot about this, and there's 3 things that I would take away or share with everybody on this call. And one we started to talk about, but I firmly believe in this, is now more than ever, we're in an environment of productive discomfort, right? And so be able to take advantage of that environment. There's going to be disruptions, and be prepared to adapt and adapt constantly in an organization for us to move forward. And it goes into the same way of how we're managing our people, right? So when we think about managing our people, performance and talent is key. If your organization is not on top of continuous performance management and identifying key talent, you're going to fall behind. If you're not in a position to constantly be doing talent management or a 9-box or whatever your process is, or development plans, and understanding who your performers are in the organization, you're gonna feel the hurt. And especially those that are in very unique positions, which leads to my last point is train, and document. It's important that the employees and the associates, we're documenting performance, we're cross-training. If we're not cross-pollinating our talent where we can, we're stuck. Then you're stuck in an environment where this person only has this job in this business unit or in this department. And if we're going to continue to challenge ourselves, we have to have the ability to move great talent of people that have potential and experience across the organization. And so if we are not challenging that, those top performers are going to leave. It's those individuals that don't perform are going to be the quiet ones that are going to stay forever because they know they can't go anywhere else, and we're not going to advance in the organization. And so I find myself in this new role because we are a company that was essentially a co-op. We were just different companies not coming together as a unified platform. I'm finding myself doing introductions of key talent into other business units and trying to cross-pollinate talent to help people out. So that I cannot stress enough when it comes to looking at your talent pool and performance management and holding people accountable.
Okay, thank you. Mary Catherine, we'll go to you real quickly.
Okay, I'll keep mine short, but I would actually say that Kathy already said it, and she did it a much better job, because one of my points was going to be make sure your policies are reflecting how you're doing business now, but part of that is, are you tracking your employees as you should? Do you know how they're doing? Are you keeping track of how they're doing? And Kathy mentioned this earlier, that, and this is very, very much related to the legal concerns, you need to know how they're doing, and if there are issues, and you have to be documenting that if you want to take action. And I think that, that falls through the cracks during this time of COVID for some employers, just because of the shift to remote work. So just that general point of Have you let your employees know the expectations? Have you trained them on those expectations? I would also say use this as an opportunity to make sure not only how your people are doing, but what they're doing. Really communicate about that. Ask those questions. Figure those things out. And you're going to be in a better position to take action if you need to make changes. And then finally, I would just say, call your lawyer because you're going to get some tough questions, certainly in the next several months if you haven't already gotten them. And make sure you run that by your counsel. Run it by your counsel when you have somebody saying, I don't want to come back to work. And, I think I can do my job remotely. Run it by your counsel when they say, I can't come back to work. All of those questions really you should just make sure you're asking those questions before you make internal decisions that may cause problems down the road.
John, in the spirit of equal time, I didn't know we were able to put in plugs. Mary Catherine said, call your lawyer. I say, call your recruiter.
Yeah, I think for all of our CFO and financial executives out there, it's also work closely with your HR executive. The thing that I walked away with is that there's many, many dimensions to this highly changing environment we're working in. You really got to collaborate with others to really understand it. And Kathy, I wrote down your 2 words that it just stuck with me: productive disruption. And I think that's the new reality that we all have to talk to. And it really summed up very well things that Jim talked about in terms of the types of candidates you need to have. Kathy, how you need to really have process and policies and monitoring people. How are they doing in this productive disruption? As well as Mary Catherine, you need to get in front of this. You need to understand the legal policies, issues. As a collective executive team, how are we getting our head around these things in this new reality called productive disruption? Because despite the disruption, we need to continue to be productive. So I knew this was going to be a good webcast after we did our practice call. You exceeded my expectations. And I would encourage everybody to, just look for some of the information we'll be sending, from Jim and Mary Catherine in terms of other things you should be thinking about so you have those. I want to thank our speakers again. Phenomenal job. And thank you. And with that, we're going to close down the webcast today. It was just to me, I learned a lot. So thank you very much to all 3 of you. Have a great day and stay healthy, and we'll be talking to everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.